Welcome to another episode of Dear ADHD Family Coach with Leslie Josel.
My child gives up after that first tough problem. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is I get this a lot where, my child will look at a piece of paper, look at maybe a homework assignment or look at an activity they have to do. And they're like, if I can't do it and it's too tough and too hard, they're done and they stop. And a lot of this comes from, and I talked a lot about this in that first video. So if you're watching this one, I really would advise you go back to the first one. We talk a lot about brain flooding or cognitive load. And how I want you to think about cognitive load is like, think of the head with like 100-pound boulder on it, right? It's heavy, cognitive load. They're bearing a load. It's just too heavy. It's too much. It's too burdensome. It's too much that I have to figure out. And if your child has weak EF, so remember what I said to you about strengthening the brain, if your child's only capable of doing things that are easy because, that's the equivalent of lifting a 2-pound weight, doing something that's super tough or super problematic or something that they have to figure out is the equivalent of a 10-pound weight. So what do we do? Well, before you do anything, you need to figure out what is going on behind the scenes. So first rule of thumb here is to speak to your child's teachers if that is what is happening and that is where it's happening. Because number one, have they even discussed the problem with you? Are they seeing this in school? Or is this something you're seeing like just maybe during homework time? So you need to then go to the teacher and explain to them what you're seeing. Open communication, number one thing. But by going to the teacher, you're going to also ask them what's up. So what are they saying? Maybe that could help you understand this. So for example, maybe your child gets super distracted and therefore doesn't move on to that, next question and realizes they're out of time and might look like a tough problem, but that's what the issue is for them. Do they even understand the assignment? I talk about this a lot about it's not so much what your child has to do, it's do they understand what it is they have to do? So the problem might not even be tough per se. It might be that they have absolutely no understanding of what it is they have to do, and therefore trying to figure it out is too much cognitive overload for them, and therefore they're giving up. Do they know how much time they actually have even to work on it? Is it a time problem? Or are they just possibly overwhelmed by the amount of it? Remember what I said about being overwhelmed? So is it a tough, maybe it's a tough problem, but they're also so overwhelmed because there's also so much of it. So you've got to get a read. So a couple of rules here, what I like to do is I like to set time limits. And what does that mean? Well, if you're finding that this is a time management issue, I want you to ask possibly the teacher if your child can use actually a visual timer. Because what I like about visual timers is they can help your child self-monitor and keep track of time. So if you can even put like a timer on your child's desk, even at home, doesn't only have to be at school, during the allotted amount of time that they're allowed to work on the assignments, or, maybe it will jar them out of like just getting stuck. It'll help them kind of move to the next one or get going. It'll give that internal motivation to say, okay, that time is ticking. I only have X amount of time. Let me try to get going. Sometimes when a child is lost in time, they just kind of shut down. I see that a lot. And then my biggest one is always about eliminating that overwhelm. So perhaps the problem isn't tough or hard academically. It might be that there's just too much stuff going on that page for your child. I call that distractions. If your child is looking at a page and there's 20 math problems, and it could be simple computation, their brain might be flooded, not because the problem is tough necessarily, but there's just too much information on that page. The brain gets flooded and he's done, put a fork in him. So possibly only seeing 2 questions on a page with room underneath, maybe even a work on it, it might help your child feel less anxious and maybe get through the assignment. And then lastly, and I know this is a funny one and it might seem obvious, but it's not always obvious, is have you sat down at all with your child to ask them, what is it that is happening? And you can prompt them. I'm going to put myself back on for this one. You can prompt them. You could ask them. You can say, I'm noticing this or that is happening. Is it because of? And see what they have to say.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. And if you want to be notified when a new Dear ADHD Family Coach episode drops, make sure to hit that subscribe button.